This is the church spire that we're going to be drawing in this video. I like to think of this sort of spire as a stepped spire because there are these various sections and each one is smaller in size and therefore step back from the edge of the one underneath, which gives its own interesting challenges when we draw. This church is in Amsterdam. It's just next to the Anne Frank exhibition. So as we queued to go in, I got to admire it for quite a lengthy period of time. So here it is, and let's go. Let's draw it. In this part, we're now drawing the base of the tower, and this is clearly the most straightforward section to draw. But it's a danger thinking it's simple, therefore we can just do it quickly. It's really important that we carefully observe the proportions in our drawing, particularly the angle of the lines, because these are the foundation of what goes on top. And if we get the foundations not angled correctly, then it's going to make it harder for us to put the elements that go on top, that stack on top. And the challenge with a tower is to stack all the elements really tightly on the center line so that none of them look wobbly or shaky or like a kiddie's tower of blocks that wasn't put together very well. We don't want the viewer to be nervous it's going to fall down. This next section is possibly the most important because it's where we start with the serious decorative elements, and it's also where we establish, probably most importantly, the proportions of the rest of the tower. So it's important to try and get the angles correct on this level. We've got two columns that aren't exactly the same height. There's a downward slope between them with the perspective. We're also looking up underneath them. So there is this ledge that goes around the top of them, but we're looking up from underneath, and so we see a lot of the underneath of that ledge, which can be a bit trickier to draw. And also at the top of the columns, the entablature that goes around the top actually angles out at 45 degrees above each column, which looks really nice, but again, it can be a challenge to draw. And because we're not looking straight on, the angles are not symmetrical with each column. We actually have to draw the left-hand angles of that 45 degree piece differently to the angles on the other column because they are not symmetrical. So you can see me using my trusty method of using my pen to measure the angles, and again just making sure it looks right, and again constant reference to our photo. And now we start the third section of this spire. I start with the decorative urns because they're actually the closest elements, and where possible I always like to draw closest things first so that then we can position the lines behind them properly. And you might notice that if you have a look at how I've drawn those urns, I like to draw that sort of shape as a series of stacked shapes. I find I can get a much more accurate looking urn much more easily that way. And then again, it's more of the same. We need to position these two columns. Notice that each of the columns stacks back from the one below it. They don't all stack up in a straight line. And that's the sort of detail that it's really important to pay attention and to notice, that each column on each tier moves further towards the center. And again, we have these 45 degree sections coming out from the entablature over the columns. And again, we need to pay attention to the angles. And again, they're not the same because it's not quite a symmetrical view. And the higher up we go, the more we see underneath the sections. And so the wider that ledge appears to become as the tower goes higher. And then we have the little clock to put in, which I probably haven't done my best clock there. But yeah, that pretty much does then the third section. And so now we start the final section, the final stacked piece of this spire. It's a little more straightforward now because we're quite used to the various elements and how we're going to draw them. The columns that stack back slightly, the right-hand one's slightly shorter than the other. Notice with these arches that we have on the top two sections that they become quite shallow because of the perspective angle that we're looking at them from. And at the sides, we have these examples of really extreme perspective where we really just have to forget that they're sides of a building and just draw the shapes that we see to get them tight enough. Again, this top ledge, we look underneath it a whole lot more. We've got these 45-degree angled parts. And now we have this crown on top. It's really important if there's a cross or something on the top such as this to really make sure we get that center line really in the right place. Take a lot of care in positioning that. And then once we've got that crown in place and we're happy with the cross being dead on center, there's just a few little bits and pieces to tidy up and finish up. It's always good to have a good look around. Invariably, I find little bits and pieces and details that I forgot about. In fact, there's one little detail that I finished after I finished filming because I didn't even see it at this stage. But a quick look around and just adjusting any lines that don't look quite right, and then we're done. Hi, I'm Stephen Travers. I hope that was helpful. The important thing to remember with any spire, whether it's a stacked one or it's a more simple form, is to have a nice straight center line directly in the right place, that from whatever the top point is, particularly if it's something really thin like a cross, right down through the base, there's a nice center line and everything is positioned perfectly around that center line. We want a nice tight stacking so that it's a perfectly straight arrow up into the sky. Well, whatever spires you draw, I hope you have fun doing them. I personally find them really interesting and satisfying shapes to draw. So whatever you're drawing, have fun with it, and I'll see you next time.